welcome to week 8 of Jets, a final drive. I'm your host, Jeane Coakley. Like always, I'm joined by Connor Hughes. Connor Hughes, I'm bringing in the other Connor this week because it's another exciting show. So we need double Connors. Jets analyst, Connor Rodgers. Guys, we got a lot to get to, but let's remind everybody you can find the audio version of Jets Final Drive on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Guys, the Jets have now lost 5 straight and are now 2-6 after Jacoby Brissett. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Jacoby Brissett led the Patriots on a last-minute 70-yard game-winning touchdown drive. They got Hassan Reddick back. They traded for Davante Adams. They got rid of their head coach, yet the results are still the same. Connor Hughes, I'll start with you. Where do the Jets go from here?
I don't know, Jeane. I don't. I mean, I saw the numbers. Dan Orlovsky tweeted them out. I think teams that did not commit a turnover scored over 20 points and held the opponent to under 250 yards were 750-0 before yesterday, and now they are 750-1. The Jets like to talk in these post-game locker rooms about how it's the little things that are holding them back. They're right there on the cusp of being a really, really good football team. Do this small little thing right and it'll be fine. Fix this and it'll all be okay. But what is so damning is that this team is not finding ways to win. They're not learning how to win like these players like to talk about and coaches like to talk about. They are inventing, quite literally, new ways to lose football games. It's bad. It is so bad. And I don't even know where you go from here, Jeane, because, you know, when the Jets were struggling in past years, we could always point to things like it's the quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. Like they need the quarterback. They just need to do a quarterback, or it's the offensive line. There was one thing every single week that held the Jets back. Like there was one thing that held the Jets back, and that's what was causing them issues. And as long as they fixed those things, it was going to be fine. It is something new every single week with this team. It was Aaron Rodgers making the mistake with the interception when he was targeting Mike Williams, but then in the Minnesota game. It was the missed field goal against the Denver Broncos. Then it was Mike Williams running the wrong route. Then all of a sudden we transitioned to now where it was 3 consecutive games in a row. The Jets offense had the ball in their hands with a chance to drive down to the field and win the game. They went 0 for 3 in those situations. Against New England, they finally go down the field. They finally punch it in a 70-yard drive. Braylon Allen, they've got the momentum. They can win. All they need to do is keep Jacoby Brissett, who stinks, out of the end zone, and the defense, which had been so good, just marches as the Patriots walk right down the field and score. The key play is being the 12-yard run from Brissett on 3rd and 9. The long completion 34-yarder on Sauce Gardner, the all-pro, to bring the Patriots down there. The 4th and 1 run to Stevenson to clinch the game. It's so demoralizing, and it is so defeating because you look at this team and it's something different every single week, with the only common denominator being they are losing.
Connor Rodgers, do you have an answer? I mean, where do the Jets go from here?
Yeah, well, number one, they just don't do a lot of the little things right, and it piles up into a bigger issue, right? They don't play good special teams, and by that, it's not just missing kicks. Even when you look at the ball that Herb Charles couldn't down at the 1-yard line, that was as perfect as a punt as you could ask for. They don't cover punts very well, as we saw Marcus Jones rip off a big-time punt return as well. They're undisciplined against the run, right? They don't keep contain. They lose contain all the time. I mean, allowing Drake May to scramble against you is one thing. Allowing Jacoby Brissett to scramble against you is just flat out embarrassing. And obviously, they're undisciplined from a penalties aspect as well. So this is a football team without an identity right now. They don't know what they're good at on offense, and they came into this game. New England was one of the worst run defenses against outside zone. The Jets had a good outside zone approach with Breece Hall in the first half, but for some reason, they got away from that. They don't lean on what they're good at. They're not clutch in big-time moments, and they can't rely on their top players to make a play for them when they need one at their absolute peak of a moment. And we've seen that with failed game-winning drives from Aaron Rodgers over the last couple weeks, but yesterday it was the defense. Allowing Kayshon Boutte, a former UDFA wide receiver, to catch a big play against Sauce Gardner in that spot. I mean, it's just utterly disappointing over and over again. They don't communicate on the back end of this defense. They look very, very soft up front many times against the run. They miss a ton of tackles. They have so many mistakes where we're not looking at it and going, fix this, fix that, or this player's coming to save this. Right now, they're just a bad football team in all 3 phases of the game, lacking consistency where it matters most.
And Connor, I think what I keep going back to, and it's the one thing that I circle and say, this just felt like the rash reactionary decision that was done without really thinking it all the way through, was firing Robert Saleh. And in no way, shape, or form am I sitting here telling you that Robert Saleh is a coach of the year. Robert Saleh was absolutely not without fault. Robert Saleh was absolutely not without blame. His record of, 20-36? I mean, that's something he's going to have to own, because there were so many situations and so many games in the past where the Jets just didn't look like they were ready to play, weren't prepared, they were out-schemed, out-coached, all that fun stuff. Like, it was absolutely on the head coach, and there was an issue there. But when the Jets made the decision to move on from Robert Saleh, it was almost like it was made with just like this is what we're going to do and everything's going to be fine. There's a reason why when teams make interim coaching changes, 99% of the time they go to the special teams coordinator, or they go to a positional coach on the roster, or somebody who has some kind of head coaching experience. Seldom are they given to the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, because in season, to put that much responsibilities on one person is debilitating and backbreaking. And we've seen that now, because the one thing the Jets could always hang their hat on, especially through the first 5 weeks of the season, was their defense was still there. It wasn't perfect. There were always issues in the run game, but it was still a top 10, maybe top 5 defense when they were really on. And that was without Hassan Reddick and dealing with some of the injuries. When they fired Robert Saleh, and then they went to Jeff Ulbrich, they didn't say, okay, Jeff, you were the defensive coordinator, let's give those obligations to somebody else. They just took all of the responsibilities of Robert Saleh, put them on Jeff Ulbrich's plate, and now you can tell the guy is overwhelmed. And I do genuinely believe that Jeff Ulbrich can be a good head coach in the NFL, but this is just like a disastrous situation, because now you already had issues on offense and with the quarterback. Now you have issues on the defense because you have somebody who's being pulled so thin in Ulbrich. Again, this is not a situation where they absolved or took away some of his responsibility as coordinator. They said, no, you're still our defensive coordinator. You still run the defense. Oh, but yeah, now you also have to be the head coach, when Ulbrich has never been a head coach before in his entire career. It was just such a colossal mismanagement, and it really... It sounds crazy. A couple weeks ago, the Jets were a game out of first place and playing for first place in the AFC East against the Bills. Now they've lost 5 straight and the season's over before Thanksgiving. Like, it is just wild to me. And the little bits of the sky that are falling all over the place, we've got all these problems. I'm sure we'll get to it with the play clock. I think part of it's because you see Aaron Rodgers shaking off the plays he doesn't want from Todd Downing. Dude, he's the offensive coordinator. Run the play. Like, there are so many issues, and again, like Connor said, it's not one thing. It's not one thing you can focus on and say, fix this and we're good. It's just, there's 37 cracks in the dam, and at this point, the water's already through.
You know what's mismanaging? Connor Hughes jumping ahead on the topics because he's this flustered and this upset. Yeah. We're going to get to Jeff Ulbrich, but I have another question for you, Connor Rodgers, first. Have the Jets already quit on themselves? Has this team quit?
I don't think they've quit. I think they're lost. And I think a lot of people kind of mix up the two because it kind of looks the same out on the field when those things are going on. You can look at it and say, okay, they're really struggling, and I think they're not competent. And sometimes that looks like a lack of effort when really you're just swimming upstream all the time. You have communication issues on the back end. They kind of let that feeling overtake them when things go wrong of, oh man, here we go again, rather than a confident winning football team that when those things happen, they go, okay, we've been here before, we're going to have an answer, and we're going to find a way to win this game. And that's how I look at the Jets right now, is that when you're confused or you kind of, demoralized, Jeane, you can play slow. And that looks like a team that's quitting when in reality, they just don't have the answers right now. And they're clearly a team that they don't know who to lean on for those answers, because Connor just highlighted this really well. Jeff Ulbrich is spread too thin right now, and it goes deeper than just firing Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh didn't build a good offensive staff, so they don't have guys on the offensive staff that can give these players answers, whether it was the fact they really rolled into this season with Nathaniel Hackett as the play caller, and then knowing that would fail, well, they pulled the rug out and try to move to Downing, which is a fine idea in theory, but the problem is your quarterback doesn't trust Todd Downing, as Connor highlighted, that when the play call is coming in, there's obviously a lot of communication issues or disagreements. Then you're getting up to the line of scrimmage. You're trying to smoke out the defense, and the play clock runs out. And this isn't just 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. This is a consistent issue over and over again. And you look at the offensive line, all the drama they had in the offseason with Keith Carter that the team made publicly known on Instagram. So Robert Saleh built a staff that was not built to win football games. And now the trickle effect is, sure, you could pull the plug on Robert Saleh, but the people behind him aren't qualified to do a better job. And that's how the Jets are where they are right now.
But why do they have the offensive staff they have right now, Connor? Why do they have it? He built the offensive staff. He brought in the revolutionary young offensive mind in Mike LaFleur. He had Rob Calabrese there to run the show as well. They were going to run the motion, the San Francisco offense that 31 other teams are obsessed and want to replicate. They brought it in there. And guess what? That offense worked at a top 5 statistical level with anyone else under center but Zach Wilson. It worked with Mike White. It worked with Josh Johnson. It worked even with the immobile Joe Flacco, despite the fact they really didn't have elite level receivers except for a young Garrett Wilson, and they had an absolutely atrocious offensive line. The ownership and everyone up above wanted Mike LaFleur out. They fired him, and it was impossible to find a competent switch because everyone looked at this Jets situation and said, why do I want to go work there? What makes me want to go join that offensive staff when it's basically a playoff mandate? You have absolutely no idea what you're going to do at quarterback. I don't know if you can guarantee me any quarterback at all. So I'm going to go here, work in a situation where we don't have a quarterback, and then I'm going to get fired after a year. And when am I going to get another offensive coordinator opportunity? The Jets would have loved to go out there and get the young offensive mind, maybe Todd Monken, maybe somebody like that. Kevin Patullo. No one was taking interviews for Robert Saleh because they had fired Mike LaFleur. I really believe one of you want to go to the root of all of the Jets' issues, I really genuinely do believe that it goes all the way back to when they made the decision to shake up the offensive staff in another reactionary move because it wasn't working with Zach Wilson, and it's all spiraled down afterwards. Because when they hired Nathaniel Hackett, all of us looked around and were like, dude, what are you doing? Like,
we know what you're doing. They're hiring him because they wanted to get Aaron Rodgers here. But we talk about the offensive side of the ball and the coaching staff on that side. But the Jets continue to make the same mistakes: the missed tackles, costly penalties, slow starts, failing to close out games. I mean, none of these have been corrected the last 5 weeks. Is there a coach on staff? I mean, is there someone there? What do you do?
Well, it's not changing. And Connor, you won't get a disagreement from me. I mean, that's a problem that is rooted all the way at the top of the organization that isn't going away, right? I mean, you have owner interference and obviously GM interference of, disrupting the coaches' jobs. And then it has the trickle effect of not getting a good candidate. And Saleh was left with not really a good candidate pool where he hired Hackett. He stood by Hackett. And now they got Tennessee's leftovers in Downing and Carter. I mean, that's the root of the problem with the Jets that has really nothing to do with yesterday or everything to do with yesterday of how they got here, is that the infrastructure is broken. And there's no change in sight for the infrastructure right now because that's the owner of the team and the people he's put around himself to run this organization. And that's why the team, it's not an accident that you don't make the playoffs in 14 years, right? It's them and the Buffalo Sabres. That's it in the 4 major sports. That is unbelievable. You know how hard that is to do? You could probably grab a fan out of the stands and they might make a team that can make the playoffs in 14 years. So that's an organizational infrastructure issue right now. And this team's going to have a hard time to answer the real question, Jeane. Is there anybody right now that could fix these things? The real answer is probably not. But also, is there anybody that's going to want to come here in the offseason that views this as their desirable job? That's going to depend on a lot of factors. Is Aaron Rodgers still here? Because that's going to be a deterrent right now with kind of how he runs off coaches. Are they going to have the ability to build things the right way? Are they going to have more draft picks after this trade deadline? Probably not, because I don't think Joe Douglas is going to trade away pieces right now for picks that he's not going to make.
Shots, but
Right. So, and yeah, we think Woody Johnson's getting on the phone and saying, okay, I'll take a 5th-round pick back for, whoever it may be, Morgan Moses. Like, this is the problem when you are not a serious football organization right now, where things have spiraled across every level, whether it's scouting, drafting, free agency, coaching, the roster, and lack of leadership right now. The Jets are searching for just mediocrity in every single one of those areas.
You mentioned Aaron Rodgers and Connor Hughes. He doesn't seem to be on the same page with offensive play caller Tao Dunning. As we just mentioned before, the team used all of its first half timeouts in the first quarter. I was sitting right next to you watching the game, and we were like, wait, what is going on? This is uncharacteristic for a quarterback known for controlling the game. What is causing his hesitancy this season?
Jeane, he doesn't look good. Like, I go back to when
is
the
this
Jets
age?
acquired
Is this the injuries? What
Janae, I think it's a lot. I think it's everything. I mean, when the Jets acquired Aaron Rodgers, I remember talking to, this was everyone, and everyone was talking about, when Joe Douglas was talking about this, and Robert Saleh was talking about this, they all stressed, like, we realize we're not necessarily getting a 31, 32-year-old Aaron Rodgers. We know that he's maybe not a 2 or 3 or 4 best quarterback in the entire NFL, but even 70 or 65 or 80% of Aaron Rodgers is still good enough to get us into the postseason and have us make a run. We can put the pieces around him like he didn't necessarily have in Green Bay that would be able to take them to the top. So the Jets did know already getting into this, they weren't getting all-pro, all-world Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they thought they were going to get flashes of it, but they knew he was an older player. The problem right now, Janae, is just he looks, I mean, from a playing standpoint, he looks older. Like, he looks very much like a 41-year-old quarterback. And I do genuinely believe that these injuries that the Jets are trying to brush off, and Rodgers himself is trying to brush off, that's one of the reasons why he has no mobility. He's dealing with 2 knee injuries, a low ankle sprain, and now a hurt hamstring. Like, that absolutely takes your toll. But the one thing that I go back to with Aaron, and I think it's what's so frustrating to me and difficult for me to comprehend, is when the Packers made the decision to move on from Mike McCarthy. What they did was they went out and hired Matt LaFleur, and Matt and Aaron had a conversation before he was hired, but he wasn't necessarily the head coach that Aaron wanted. What the Packers did was they brought in a head coach who was going to challenge Aaron, probably challenge him for the first time since he was a rookie or really just getting started. They were going to make him a little uncomfortable. Matt LaFleur was going to do things that he believed was going to be successful. He was going to be the coach. Rodgers was going to be the quarterback. The first 2 years they were together, they went 13-3 each year, and Rodgers was an MVP both seasons. I know it wasn't the scheme that Aaron Rodgers wanted to work, where it was the creativity and the motions and trying to deceive the defense, but it was working. And it was probably going to work in year 3 as well if it wasn't for the fact that Rodgers hurt his thumb in London against the Giants. Then just wasn't really the same. Packers fell behind. They didn't make the playoffs. Still had a win-in opportunity, though, against the upstart Lions towards the end of that year. So what I just can't fathom for me is, like, I get wanting to be comfortable. I get wanting to do what you wanted to do. And maybe if those first 2 years with LaFleur, they went 7-9 or 8-8, and it just wasn't a playoff season, and it was like, okay, yeah, this just doesn't work with Rodgers. But it did. Then he comes to the Jets, and what he does is he just gets everything that he wants. He gets the players that he wants. He gets the hand-picked coach that he wants. He has a GM and a head coach that are basically just saying, yeah, sure, Aaron, whatever you want to do. He gets the scheme that he believes works. And I remember he told us this, Janae, where it was like, we don't need the creativity. The defense can know what we're going to do. We're just going to out-execute you. But then he goes out onto the field, and you see this offense that just lacks creativity despite having the playmakers, lacks the potential, lacks game-breaking potential. Plus, then you have a quarterback that looks significantly older, and what you have is just a broken scheme. And it's not all on Rodgers in any way, shape, or form. It's not all on him, but it's just a colossal, fundamental fracturing of everything that is wrong right now. And it just stems back to just you can't. This is not the NBA. You can't have player-run teams to this extent. You want to have player-run locker rooms, absolutely, but not teams. You still need coaches. And Rodgers had the coach that challenged him in Green Bay, and you saw the results be so incredible. And then he came here where it's so many yes men, and it's just like, it's just failing. It is failing at an epic magnitude, because honestly, when I look at the roster, and Connor can probably test this too, I don't see weaknesses. Safety, maybe somewhat of the offensive line, but it's still a functional group. That's a functional line, really good playmakers, a good tight end, 2 backs, a good defense, and it's still not working. Why? Why is it not working? It's because coaching matters. And I think the problem with that is it still stems back to Rodgers, because these are the guys he wanted.
Rodgers, what's your thought on why Aaron just doesn't seem himself?
I think, to me, Jeane, it starts with, number one, the best he's looked was that Thursday night football game against New England, where he started to break out of the pocket, extend plays, make plays with his legs. And they had some huge conversions on plays where he rolled out. And New England lost contained because they didn't expect that from him. And it kind of looked like, okay, week 3, he didn't play in the preseason. Week 3, he got his legs back under him. Then he had really injuries pile up from that moment on, whether it's ankle, hamstring, on and on it goes. These little things pile up. He can't move back there, and he has no interest in moving back there. So when he gets to the line of scrimmage and he wants to see everything in front of him, what the defense is doing, what coverage they're running, the pressure look, if they're rotating their safeties, how his offensive line is set up and how the protection is set up, something he said in the press conference after the game yesterday, then everything has to be perfect. And that's not on Aaron Rodgers. That's on everybody on offense. That means if an offensive lineman misses their block or doesn't hold their block for 3 to 5 seconds, Rodgers can't move or readjust the pocket or break out of the pocket. That's not a way to live in the NFL. Look at all the great teams in the NFL right now. Those guys can create, whether it's Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Jaden Daniels right now for Washington, even guys that are mid-tier quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts at times. And, I know Stroud doesn't really run a lot, but he's a guy that can move in and out of the pocket. So for me right now, they are not creative on offense. He doesn't want to be creative on offense. They're static is what I like to call it. When they come out and line up, everything that you see is kind of what you get. But that means there's no room for failure at all. That means if your initial first or second read isn't there and Rodgers isn't going to move, he's either going to throw the ball away, he's going to take a sack, or the play's dead. That's it. And that's a way you can't live in the modern NFL. There's no successful team that is living like that right now. The most successful team that has a quarterback that doesn't move and make plays with his legs is Jared Goff. And two things with Jared Goff. Yeah. One, he doesn't miss. Two, he plays in Ben Johnson's offense that has more going on around it, eye candy, trick plays, motion, than feels like most teams in the league. And that's not the Jets at all. So that's the way they've built this thing, and it's blown up in their face.
They built it because that's how the quarterback wanted it.
Right.
Yeah, and they mortgaged the house for it, and let's see what happens. All right.
Well, let me say this. Sorry, not to be long on this. This is the hand you are dealt when your initial plan fails. Joe Douglas missed on trying to fix things around Sam Darnold, which was kind of a half-hearted effort. We all knew that. Missed on the Zach Wilson pick. And then that when you miss on top 5 quarterbacks, you have to pull the emergency lever. That means you're dealing with someone's damaged goods. Aaron Rodgers is a future Hall of Famer. Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old now with multiple injuries. They had to pull that lever, which had a high ceiling. It also had a really, really low floor, and it bottomed out on them.
All right, the alternative line of thinking was trade the pick and build around Sam. And they did. Again, trade the pick, try to run it back with Sam with a colossal amount of draft capital. Maybe it works. If it doesn't, you grow in with the quarterback the next year.
Hey, hindsight is 20/20, right, when it comes to the NFL.
Well, they talked about that in the draft room, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, 3 of the Jets' losses have been decided by field goal or less. With Greg Zuerlein missing at least 1 kick in each of those games, how much can you blame on Zuerlein for the team losing these games, or should it not come down to a field goal? Rodgers, we'll start with you. Connor, Rodgers, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it could be, you could evaluate things in a vacuum, right? I think Greg Zuerlein should make his kicks. That's part of the job. That's basically the job. The Jets played well enough, I thought, against the Bills that he can't miss those kicks, and you could have been in first place in the AFC East. I thought they played really poorly against the Broncos, and despite how poorly they played, they were still in position somehow to win the game if he makes his kick. And then you look at yesterday, at a minimum, it was a 4-point swing. And the Jets didn't play well. You know who played worse most of the game? The New England Patriots somehow. But they made the plays when they were handed it at the end of the game with an opportunity. So I'm not going to sit here and say those are 3 automatic wins off the board. But can I sit here and say there's at least 2 that you probably should have had, and that changes the entire narrative of the season? And the fact that they went into yesterday with Greg the Leg with no confidence, it blows my mind. I don't know how everybody else in the world could see it except them, but it was absolutely insane, and it cost them possibly the end of their season now before Halloween.
That's it. This wasn't like Greg lost this game to the Patriots because he missed 2 kicks, and these were the first 2 kicks he missed, and you're like, oh, that's right. A little freakier. Or he missed 1 or 2 kicks last week, and then they stuck with him this week, and then he missed 1 or 2 again. You're like, oh, no. I mean, this was something where for the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's been a problem with him. Dating back to the Bronco game, it's been an issue. Dating back even further when he missed a couple kicks in the preseason, it was like, there might be something there, guys. You might want to keep an eye on this. And that's like, no, it's no problem. It's no problem. They were playing with fire. They were sticking the hands in the shark tank and waiting to get bit, and that's exactly what happened. It finally came up and bit them, and it bit them in the absolute worst point in time. I mean, we were at the game, and my wife was talking to me, and she's like, "Isn't this the guy that keeps missing the kicks?" So again, this wasn't like some flash in the pan. Like everybody knew that he was missing kicks. He went in averaging 60, making 60% of his kicks. Like you knew this was just going to bite the Jets, and it did in the worst time.
Well, if Bree's even saying it, come on. Then
yeah, she knows ball though. She knows ball.
She does know ball. Connor Hughes, I don't know if her husband knows ball, but Bree knows ball. All right, with the November 5th trade deadline approaching, the Jets are running out of time to change the course of their season. Connor Rodgers, if the Jets lose to the Texans, can you see Joe Douglas moving any players before the deadline to salvage some long-term success for this team?
I mean, teams will want them. This player market is really thin right now, and there are a lot of contenders because of how poor both the AFC has been and how wide open the NFC can be. And the Jets have things that teams need. Wide receiver, Mike Williams maybe. I would be really surprised if they just pulled the cord on the Devontae Adams situation, but if I was hired as GM today, I would blow this thing up, and he would absolutely be someone I would try to get some compensation back for. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Is there a situation where you can unload a Hassan Reddick if you think that I love DJ Reed, heart and soul player. He's on an expiring contract. He's probably going to hit free agency. We all know that's the worst kept secret. You can get something for a corner like him that's playing at a really high level in a year where not a lot of people are on the Jets defense. So if I could stockpile an extra 4th round pick, 5th round pick, 6th round pick from this deadline, I'm absolutely doing it. The Jets have the players to do so. But at the end of the day, the problem is I don't believe that the current GM and the structure of this organization will actually do that right now.
Sorry, we've talked about this before. If the Jets can't prove they're a winning organization, do you see stars like Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall requesting trades this offseason?
We'll see on that front. I don't know if I'm ready to go that strong with it. I mean, that would be pretty damning if Garrett and Breece are asking to get out, because those are two foundational players and would probably paint a very, very, very negative look at the current state of this team. But as if based off what we saw Breece Hall looking like in the post-game locker room with his hand in his head, with a towel over his head, just staring at the floor in full uniform. Yeah, I could absolutely see something like that happening. But this is more about the players who are on expendable and expiring contracts, like Connor said. I mean, again, Joe Douglas isn't necessarily running the show anymore. This has kind of been Woody's operation ever since he fired Robert Saleh. He took control. He's like, look, this thing's going down. I'm going to right the ship. I'm going to fix things. So Joe is just doing what Woody instructs him to do. That's why when Drew Rosenhaus came here to try to fix the Hassan Reddick situation, he met with Woody Johnson. Woody Johnson then went to Joe and said, hey, finish this up and get this done. And then they figured it out and they made it work. So what I would keep an eye on, and this is if the Jets lose to the Texans, because if they beat to the Texans, I do believe they're not going to be buyers at the deadline, because I don't know who else they can buy. They've already bought everyone that they can buy. But at the deadline, I think they'll probably keep the team and try to see this one through. However, if they lose to the Texans on Thursday night, that's when I do genuinely believe the Jets should blow this up with anybody on an expiring contract. That's Tyler Conklin, who I believe will have value. That's DJ Reed, I believe he has value. That's CJ Mosley, I believe he could have value. He's actually under contract for next year. And the other player to keep an eye on is Tyrod Taylor, who I believe could also have value. There's so many teams out there that are maybe looking for a veteran. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is dealt. I don't think Aaron Rodgers can be dealt. I don't think anyone would want Aaron Rodgers at this point. But Tyrod Taylor is somebody who has played in so many different offenses, reliable veteran, knows what he's doing. A team like the Browns, who maybe want to try to make a little bit of a run. There's so many. A team like the Raiders, who's dealing with issues. I mean, there's so many teams out there that could absolutely use somebody like Tyrod Taylor that he's an option. But there would be absolutely no point in the Jets holding on to these players at 2-7. 3-6. Maybe you're starting to think, all right, look, we beat the Cardinals next week, then we can maybe start going against so I get that. 3-6, I believe that they can still believe. But if they are 2-7, that is officially the end. And anyone who's on an expiring contract, anyone who do not believe is going to be on the Jets 2025 and beyond, trade them for whatever you can get. And for some of those players like a DJ Reed, I could see you getting something like a 3rd round pick. I think you could get something that's substantial for him.
That's actually a great lead into my next question, and I'll ask you, Connor Rodgers. So, like we said, we don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to return or not. But if the Jets continue to lose, so if they're now lose to the Houston at 2-7, do you see Woody Johnson trying to salvage the team with the stars he already has, or is it going to blow up the team in a complete rebuild?
I think that if this thing spirals out of control like it already has going into the offseason, they need to have an honest combo and make this job somewhat attractive. And I'll tell you right now, nobody's going to want to come take this job besides Rex Ryan that doesn't get the chance to rebuild it. I mean, literally, that's how it's going to be for them. Not a lot of coaches are not going to be attracted to coming to an organization that's running it back one more time with a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure some of the young players would be frustrated by the direction of this organization if they don't really figure out a concrete plan and get legitimate football people here in the offseason. So I think the prudent move is to, and I know a lot of Jet fans don't want to hear this, but you're going to have to give the keys to the car to somebody that you think can rebuild it the right way. And Jets fans have heard that before, because I think doubling down is the worst thing they could do right now. Joe Douglas has already structured a ton of contracts with bad void money and dead money for future years ahead. You don't want to dig yourself any deeper into this hole. If it didn't work this year, here's a hint for you. It's not going to work running it back next year with these guys. So I think you would need to get somebody that is a legitimate football mind in here, that has the respect to hire a legitimate coaching staff, and can come in and make the hard decisions. Are we going to extend Garrett Wilson and roll forward with him as a foundational piece? Are we going to consider trading a Sauce Gardner? And then who's here that can actually be a part of the future? And if you're not, you're going to get left behind. So I think the ideal move, unfortunately, is you're going to have to start over yet again, because once again, you don't want to dig yourself even deeper into this Aaron Rodgers hole.
You do, and Connor put it perfectly. I mean, I look at this roster right now, and this was the year to make the run. And then if you made the playoffs and got to the AFC Championship or divisional round or something of that nature, then you could say, okay, boys, one more go. Like the swan song, like let's do it. We're going one more year all in next year. But you look at this team and the veteran guys, Aaron's not going to be better at 42 than he is right now. Tyron Smith's not going to be better. Morgan Moses isn't going to be better. When you look at this roster, I tweeted this morning, they should have a relatively healthy-ish cap situation when you look at the number. And you're like, wow, $50 million projected right now. You make a couple moves, maybe they get to $70 million or something like that. True, absolutely. But when you look at what the Jets are going to need, that money is going to evaporate so quickly. Assuming that Rodgers retires and Devontae leaves and all that stuff, you were talking about just on offense, this team needing a new quarterback, a new backup quarterback, a new wide receiver 2, a new wide receiver 3, a new tight end because Tyler Conklin's going to be gone, a new right tackle because Morgan Moses is going to be gone. That is 6 positions on offense. You flip to defense, they're going to need a defensive end opposite Hassan Reddick. They're going to need a defensive tackle opposite Quinnen Williams. They're going to need a new cornerback opposite Sauce Gardner. They're going to need a new safety for Chuck Clark. Those are just starters. Then you also take into consideration the depth pieces that the Jets going to need, because they're going to need backups for a lot of these guys, because guys like Wes Schweitzer and so many of these other veterans, Mike Williams, that are on this team playing number 2 backup roles, they are going to be gone as free agents. That money is going to be gone like that, and it's not like the Jets have a treasure trove of draft picks to continue to flush out and fill out the roster that way, because they've traded so many of those selections. So that, again, kind of goes back to talking about trading and being sellers at the deadline, where if you don't think guys are going to be there 2025 and beyond, don't believe you're going to compete for Super Bowl in 2025 and beyond, just get as many draft capital and picks as you can to make this team a desirable destination for the next general manager and the next coach. Because if you're talking about a top 5 pick, $80 million in cap space, also seconds and thirds and fourths that you've accumulated throughout this year, maybe you can try to get somebody with a little bit better pedigree than the opportunity the Jets are going to have here, because right now, I don't necessarily know how many people are going to want this job.
Well, next up for the Jets, Thursday night on Halloween. I hope it's more treats than tricks for the Jets. They face the Texans and the 2023 Rookie of the Year, C.J. Stroud.
With
Stroud
receivers
has
this
been able to turn
time.
the Houston franchise around. Do the Jets need to keep drafting quarterbacks until they get that right one, until they find their C.J. Stroud, or should they just look for an established one in free agency? Connor Rodgers.
Well, I would keep drafting one, but you need to actually understand how to put an infrastructure in place for a guy to succeed. So that doesn't mean just keep punching in the lotto tickets and pray that a guy is a savior. If that means you need to kind of build things around it for a while and then take your quarterback, then so be it. But there actually has to be a plan. There actually has to be an offensive mind here that is going to be stapled next to that young quarterback and help him develop as well. So, yeah, it's easy to sit here and say, hey, take one every year and eventually there will be the guy. And listen, I think the Jets missed on Zach Wilson. I don't think the infrastructure mattered for him. I think he just doesn't have it at the NFL level. But it is interesting to see how guys like Geno Smith and Sam Darnold, and not just Jets related, look at Baker Mayfield, how they've rebuilt their career in better situations after being in really difficult situations. So that's the hard lesson the Jets learned, is they need to make sure they have the right infrastructure in place for a rookie quarterback. That probably starts with hiring an offensive mind, building an actual run game, and having a staff that can build a quarterback-friendly offense while the guy is developing in his first 2 or 3 years of the NFL level.
I kind of like they're only doing it this way because they couldn't successfully trade up to get the quarterback. But what the Giants are trying to do is, And what Joe Shane is attempting to do when he wasn't able to get Jaden Daniels and he wasn't able to get Drake May was it's like, okay, let's go a little bit of a different route. Let's start rounding out our roster and building out our roster to create an environment and a situation where when we then, though, go do trade up and get the quarterback or we sign the quarterback, it's not just throwing them into a situation like Sam Darnold with the Jets or like Zach Wilson in his first year with the Jets. You actually have protection and playmakers where now when the Giants go and draft a quarterback, they've got Malik Neighbors, who's the number one. They've got the offensive line, which looks substantially better this year when they have Andrew Thomas in there. They've got a defense that can rush the quarterback, and they still need corners, and they still need pieces. They're 2-5 for a reason. They're in no way, shape, or form, but you see the building blocks and pieces there where it'll be a team that maybe a quarterback can have some success with down the line. I think that might be the best way the Jets can go because this just draft a quarterback, throw him out there to die, draft a quarterback, throw him out there to die. I mean, it's not ideal.
We've seen that play before a couple times.
Yeah,
all right, we got to wrap it up because I got to pick up my kids. But it is Halloween on Thursday. The Jets are playing. I'm tired of talking about the scaries.
They're favored.
I
Can you believe it?
They were favored last week too. Okay, and the week
Vegas
before
has seen the light. Vegas is out of the dark. They've seen the light.
Insanity.
Look, Connor Rodgers, I'm going to ask you: are you the type of guy that gives out the big Halloween candy? And what are you going for Halloween, or what was your favorite Halloween costume as a kid?
So we got 2 bowls this year made.
Okay.
One is just every kind of chocolate candy you can imagine, and the other kind is every kind of sweet, like gummy, nerds,
The big boxes or the small boxes?
sour worms. No, the small, like the medium size, not the full candy bars. So, but honestly, Jeanette, I feel like we'll get about 8 trick-or-treaters, so they could just handful as much as they want here over and over again. Best Halloween costume, that's a tough one. Me and my wife did Rocket Power 3 years ago. That was probably the coolest couple costume we did. Yeah, that was pretty sick. We were Twister and Reggie Rocket. So I think that's one of the better recent ones we've done.
I like it. We'll get your address online in a minute so people can go to your house.
Yeah.
Hughes,
I won't be
what about
there.
you?
I'll be covering the Jets.
Oh, that's true. Solid point. Hughes, what about you?
Dude, we just moved last year, and last year was our first Halloween, and my neighbors told me, like, hey, just so you know, we're, like, where we live in our development, it's like, it is an ideal situation for trick-or-treaters. So they're like, hey, we get a lot of trick-or-treaters. So my wife and I bought 2 bags thinking we were fine. We ran out of that within the first hour, and I had to run back out to Walmart to get more. Like, I didn't realize, like, people literally drive their cars to our development. There's a park outside, park there, and then just let their kids go run across the neighborhood. So we're, like, unfortunately, Jets are playing on Thanksgiving or on Halloween, so we're going to have, my wife's going to be here taking care of it. But my favorite costume ever was when I was Wolverine, and I think I slept in the costume for days and days and days. This year, my daughter is obsessed with Moana, so we're going as the whole cast. So Bree's going to be Pua, our dog Lucy's going to be Hey Hey, Brooke is Moana, and then I'm Maui. And we did a trial run of the
Oh, God.
costume.
Oh, that's wild.
Wait, move it over. I want to see Brooke. Move it over. I want to see Brooke. We haven't seen Brooke.
Brooke's a little shocked. You can see Brooke there.
No, push over.
She's
push
not
over.
Moana. That's just her. She's just in a hoodie. We didn't have her dressed up yet, but I know how much she loves it. So I threw on the Moana or the Maui costume, played "You're Welcome," and then came downstairs dancing for her, and she had a blast. So I'm big into the Halloween. We're gonna try to like enjoy it a little bit in the morning before I have to go to work. But then my wife and mom and sisters and my wife's family are gonna come over and go trick or treating with her.
All right, I always like the houses with the big Reese's peanut butter cups. All right, guys, thank you for all your tricks, your treats, everything. Hopefully, we're talking a fun win after on Friday. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks for joining this episode of Jets Final Drive. I can't believe it's week 8 already. Jets, again,
many
like
left?
you said, make what? I know.
How many left?
17, right? The Jets make a quick turnaround to play the Texans on Halloween, so we'll see you again right here and real soon once again. Connor might be in his costume. Maybe Connor Rodgers will join us in his costume. I don't really know. Of course, you can catch the audio version of Jets Final Drive on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For Connor Hughes and Connor Rodgers, I'm Jeane Coakley. We'll see you Friday to recap the Jets-Texans matchup.